Please welcome Steve Burrows.
I'm Steve Burrows. Can you hear me? The first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank all the families of the beautiful souls in that mosaic that you saw for sharing photos of their loved ones. Each one was either injured or died due to medical error. When my mom was struck down, we thought we were all alone. 10 years later, the morning after Bleed Out debuted on HBO, I woke up to thousands of emails, Facebooks, phone calls from patients and families all over the country. Complete strangers, all telling in very different ways the very same story. I quickly learned that each of their stories were sacred and that they all deserved to be heard. But through their private messages to me, they all felt universally voiceless, that they were in a vacuum, screaming into the void in their own part of the world, in their own state, in their own town, until they saw my mom on TV fighting for her life. And then they realized they were not alone. I had the exact same epiphany at the exact same time. Let me tell you how I got here. For 20 years, I was a comedy guy in LA making a fool of myself for a living. I usually played subtle variations of submoronic schlubs who didn't get the girl, the job, or the money. Life was great until, no, seriously, it was great. That was my day job. That's all I did, was act like an idiot. And then my mom fell off her bike back in Wisconsin. Now, breaking a hip happens 1,000 times a day in America, but this time it was different. So for those of you who have not seen Bleed Out, I'll just give you just a few little bullet points of what happened. My mom would lay in excruciating pain in the hospital for 8 days with no plan of care. She was inexplicably rushed into surgery while still on 3 blood thinners, where she would lose over half the blood in her body. She was taken to an ICU where her blood pressures repeatedly dropped to deadly levels. But the bedside ICU doctors in this hospital system in Wisconsin were replaced by electronic ICU camera doctors. Cameras, we were told, that were never turned on due to patient privacy issues. The ICU and the electronic EICU didn't even notice my mom was in a coma for 2 days. I found her in a coma. What do I know? Nothing. Medical experts would later testify that the totality of the handwritten anesthesia records in my mom's surgery were medically impossible in the history of medical science. Partial hip replacement, coma, permanent brain damage. My comedy life ended just like that. My mom needed me. Plan A was always to just take care of my mom at all costs, do whatever we needed to do. Plan B was get her justice in court as best we could. That led to a 7-year trial, by the way. Plan C, which we wouldn't even think of for 5 more years, was make a documentary about this insane experience. Now, the worst thing I've ever seen in my lifetime, other than my mom's pain and suffering, was watching doctors lie under oath. It made me sick. I didn't want to make this film. I needed to make it. And then I caught a real break. Nancy Abraham at HBO Films saw some of my footage, and for some of you who've seen the actual film, I went undercover in this thing because I knew no one would believe me, right? Who's going to believe me? You going to believe me or you going to believe the doctor? And she saw this footage and she said, let's go tell the truth. So for 6 years, we started making this movie, and we couldn't tell anybody that we were making this movie. 15 million viewers later, we suddenly realized that patient safety was a thing. I did not know this. I was so deep in trying to navigate the medical waters of treachery, I did not see it. But lucky for us, the response to Bleed Out, and we are lucky because so many millions of people don't get to tell their stories, but I got to tell mine. And it caught on with the press, and then it caught on with the public, and then it went worldwide. It got picked up for worldwide distribution. But then something really extraordinary occurred. I started getting calls from universities, hospitals, medical schools, nursing schools, all wanting to use Bleed Out as teaching curriculum. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And this was a total surprise. I was always very concerned that when this film came out, because we name names in our film, in hospital systems, I thought the medical community would hate this film, and I was very wrong about that. But then I got a call from someone named Leah Binder from an organization called the Leapfrog Group. You heard of them? She was asking me if I wanted to partner up for accountability and transparency and patient safety. This was like one of those, paradigm shifts in my life. She shared with me their phenomenal Leapfrog mission, their undying passion, their 22 years of dogged determination to make healthcare a better, safer place for all of us. It sounded pretty damn good. And then she told me about those hospital safety grades. How is it possible, after a decade in the trenches of fighting for my mother, that I didn't know anything about Leapfrog? Had I known the hospital system where my mom was injured at got C's and D's, I would have never gone there. And for the record, while we're all here, that hospital system's Advocate Aurora, they're in Wisconsin, they still get C's and D's, and they still do not share their data with Leapfrog. They're still using that EICU system too, by the way. They don't like bedside doctors in the ICU. I don't know, it's kind of crazy. So anyway, when Leah and I started talking, the bottom line is there anything more important in healthcare than patient safety? So Leah and Leapfrog and I, we started working together, appearing at conferences, writing op-eds, having screenings. And then in 2020, Leah told me about a new patient safety school that the Leapfrog group was going to launch. And she asked me what I thought about Leapfrog naming it the Judie Burrows Education Institute. The people who know me, I don't get choked up too often, but that floored me. Because my mother was a single mother. She was a school teacher. She taught special ed in the inner city of Milwaukee for 30 years. She raised 2 kids. She never missed a day of work. And then there are lessons that she gave me, and then the rest of us in bleed out, because she fought up until the day she died. She just wanted to live and go home, thrive. USA Today said, born a teacher, died a teacher. And now this. My God, this is literally the perfect ending to this horrific story. Or as Margot told me on the way down here, actually it's the perfect beginning. My family and I are beyond thrilled and humbled at this incredible honor, and I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about the Judie Burrows Education Institute. Serving as Leapfrog's educational arm, the Leapfrog Institute, Judie Burrows, aims to build momentum for improved safety, quality, and transparency. This includes safety education for employees and families to make better healthcare decisions, education strategies for employers using Leapfrog data to improve healthcare quality, safety, and the value of their employees, education on safety measures and standards needed to improve healthcare settings, education on Leapfrog findings for healthcare advocates and the public at large. Education, education, education. My sister Beth teaches in the American School in Singapore, and she and my mom's only grandchild, Benjamin, were not able to be here tonight, but my sister wrote a note that I would like to share. Dear Leapfrog, as a teacher, my mom was a relentless champion for her students. She helped each student find their path, and if mistakes were made, she would help them embrace and learn from those mistakes so they could grow into an honest, stronger person. In continuing her legacy as an educator myself, I follow the same principles with my students so they can learn without fear. My mom always wanted to know what happened to her and why no one ever in all those years ever admitted their mistakes. It was heartbreaking that we never had an answer for her. That is why we thank you, the Leapfrog Group, for honoring our mom and educating and leading the charge for accountability and transparency and patient safety. We are deeply grateful. Love, Beth and Ben Burrows. Now, for some idiotic reason, I thought because of the success of Bleed Out that my family and I were finally immune to medical mishaps, shenanigans, and skullduggery. I thought it was over, right? We had 10 years of this. But in the last year alone, after temporarily moving from California to Wisconsin to handle my mom's final affairs, we found out that health insurance doesn't travel so well from state to state. We discovered that our free physicals cost my wife and I $2,000 each. It took 6 weeks to get an appointment to see a doctor. It's taken my wife 6 months to see a pain specialist for pain. We're still waiting. Have a drink, hon. I have had not one, but 2 biopsies for cancer, which thankfully have turned out to be something called tinea curis, AKA ringworm, AKA jock itch. Do you know this? Seriously. Did I just say jock itch at a gala? I believe I did, and I apologize. However, the bigger question is, why did they think my jock itch was cancer? Twice. Margot figured this out from Dr. Google months ago. Then, literally, just last week, my father found out he might have to have his foot amputated from an electronic chart written by a temp CNA, and that he would not be allowed to talk to his doctor, that he had to give his amputation questions. This is true. He had to give his amputation questions to the receptionist, to give to the nurse, to give to the doctor. This is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at Freighter. This is the good hospital system there. The doctor finally called my dad back last week when his office found out he was the father of the guy who made the movie Bleed Out. This is true. They're like, oh shit. Now, we shouldn't have to make a movie about lousy healthcare to get good healthcare, right? And at least in Wisconsin, it's not even working. But my point is here, if it's still happening to us, like right now, it's happening everywhere. We all know the vast majority of doctors, nurses, hospitals, and healthcare providers are doing spectacular work under unbelievable duress. They're doing the very best they can. And because of Leapfrog, we know exactly who and where these people are. But I belong to many groups teaming with patient safety warriors, many who are in this room tonight, real pros who've been doing this a long time, who are deeply discouraged about the current state of healthcare, especially since COVID, as we've all talked about. I've read patient safety articles from 20 years ago that feel like they were written yesterday. We have a hell of a lot of work to do. Fortuitously, I now know thousands of us who are up for it. This is our wake-up call to action. The people that I've met in the last 3 years since Bleed Out came out have filled me with unbridled hope. They inspire me every single day. Now, I tell you, I am nowhere near smart enough to fix or figure any of this out. But I am privileged to know an army of folks who can. This room is chock full of them. Key decision makers, stakeholders, influencers, leaders in policy, business, academia, healthcare administration, healthcare innovation, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, all part of the greater Leapfrog community. Leapfrog is right. When we all come together, we are unstoppable. 13 years ago, I was sitting next to my comatose mom, scared to death. 13 years later, I stand before you with great humility at the launch of this institute in Washington, D.C., just blocks from the White House and the Capitol. After 13 years, the bleeding in Bleed Out has finally stopped tonight. I need to thank some people. I'd like to thank HBO and Impact Partners and Creative Cast for giving me the rare opportunity to tell a story, a hard story, but a true story when no one else wanted to do it. People were scared to death to tell that story. I got to thank the Bleed Out Nation. There's 15 million of you for your continual affirmation of life, to the patient safety movement, of which we're all a part of, for changing my life forever. And to all those patients that were injured or died due to medical error, you will never be forgotten. To my partner in crime and love, Margot, who I can assure you I would not be standing without her, my best friends, Dave and Lisa, to the great Leah Binder and the singular Leapfrog group for the vital, critical work that you do for all of us. We cannot rest. Remember, I'm the guy that didn't know about you guys for 10 years. There's something wrong with that. We cannot rest until Leapfrog is a household name in healthcare for everyone. Until they know about those damn hospital safety grades. I don't go anywhere without telling somebody about put in your zip code. They go like, what? Yeah, put in your zip code. Oh my God. Or elation if you're living in Maine. Because of Leapfrog's work, I actually can sleep at night. And finally, to all of you and your beyond generous support this evening, I will continue to tell the stories of the voiceless, hopefully in the form of a television series, because my mom's story was just the tip of the iceberg. That was just like one little thing. So many stories need to be told. And just as Leapfrog Group and the Judie Burrows Education Institute will continue to educate, motivate, and save lives. Because now, after a decade of pain and suffering, my mom's legacy is no longer about how she suffered in a movie. but how that suffering led me to Leapfrog and to true, visceral, palpable, real world change. And to my mother, born a teacher, died a teacher, and because of all of you, forever a teacher. Thanks. I brought my own little lectern right here.